Hi everyone. I am on Clubhouse for those of you who can't see or who are not there. So I just started the room and I'm waiting for everybody to come in. So as I wait here for people to come in, I haven't been able to. Okay, it's been extremely busy. The past few weeks have been, pretty crazy because we're raising investment to build a platform. There's quite a lot going on. So I haven't been able to communicate properly with the people who are going to be speaking today. So I'm going to wait for everybody to come in. It's like 8 o'clock now, I think, in the UK anyway. So I'm waiting for people to come in. Oh, Barbara is here. And my colleague Lola had to drop out today because it's near, it's a bank holiday weekend here in the UK and Easter weekend. So I'm guessing that a lot of people are going to be preparing for Easter. So I can see that Barbara is here. Let's add Barbara to the stage if you would like to. Let me invite you to speak. Hilal is here. Hi, Barbara. We're. I was like basically talking to myself. I came in a bit early. So let me speak a little bit, and I'm going to check with my team to see if it sounds okay on the site for people who are watching.
Okay.
Marion is here too. Yeah. Okay.
No, thank you for the invitation, and really lovely to meet you.
Yeah, it's great to meet you as well. I'm so glad that you're here. So tell me a little bit about your story, Barbara.
Well, it's a very long and boring story, but I think most recently, last year, I was invited to chair. I work in PR and communications, and I have done for many years.
Yeah.
And I was invited to chair something called the Race and Ethnicity Equity Board. And it was set up by the PRCA, which is the biggest trade body for PR and comms, to try and just really deal with the whole diversity issue. There's just no people of colour in PR and comms in the UK, essentially. And we kind of all know why. But we decided as a board to focus on race more than any, I think, because, we know there are 9 protected characteristics in the UK, but we think people of colour and race is the biggest barrier.
Yes.
So I spend a lot of my time. I'm still a PR, but I spend a lot of my time working and writing and speaking and training around that issue.
Yes. Okay. So as you know, I'm sure you know this, in media, women are only a fraction of the people ever heard of in media. Like for example, when you look at the news, whether it's like TV, whether it's these films in general, I think it's something around less than 25% of people ever heard are women. And then of course, in addition to that, if you think, I was thinking this morning, like for example, what if Batman was like a black woman? Like, like why is it that, like, because it's like those images of like the kind of heroes that we have, right? And I was talking to Jyoti Bolani, who's our tech partner for the platform we're building, and I was saying, like, I wish more women of color would invest, because we're talking about having more women, right? And there's so many avenues where you could be. It's kind of like about meeting halfway. So on the one hand, we are saying, why are there not enough women or not more women? And on the other hand, we also need to kind of raise to the what's the word? Like how the challenge, right? Rise to the challenge.
Yes, yes. But there's a great book right now out called with Sir Lenny Henry called Access All Areas, and that is a great book that talks about representation in the media of all diverse populations, especially women, and there's especially behind the scenes as well. Directors, sound engineers, producers. There's the talent is there. Yeah. But it's just not coming through. So it's a good point you make about why we don't see different women or any of the other groups represented. The talent is there, and it's really just the decision making. It goes back to who makes the final decisions. There definitely aren't a lot of women, or a lot of women of color, making those decisions.
Yeah, but so the reason why I said tonight I called it the diversity debate is that, as somebody who comes from, I wasn't born and brought up in the UK. I was born and brought up in Iran. I came to the UK in 2005. I was already an adult when I came here, and what I realized is that, obviously, English is not my first language. I didn't learn it. I actually learned it as a foreign language when I was, not like, because when you learn another language as a child, you become pretty much like native. But I didn't learn it like a native, right? So there was all of these barriers, and I have ADHD. We're talking about diversity. Neurodiversity is another kind of diversity we need to talk about, right? So I would say, from the tests that I've done, and I know that I have ADHD. That's definitely diagnosed. But I also know that I probably have about some kind of a mild autism as well, and mild to moderate, so depending on the situation. So I've been dealing with all of these things, and at the same time, I've managed to make a really great network, and I've now been able to build a successful business. I've invested in another successful business. I'm now building the FemPeak platform. But how did I do that, right? And part of that was that I completely ignored whatever it is that you may imagine or think of as like some form of shortcoming. I never thought of it as a shortcoming. I was like, everything that's against me is going to be my benefit. I'm going to use it to my benefit. I'm going to make it, to fuel my fire. So I guess the message tonight, that's kind of what the mentality I would like to be able to get across, is that if we wait, we have a saying in Persian that right is not something that's given to you, it's something that you take. And that's kind of been my attitude. It's like, nobody is going to give you opportunities. You need to take the opportunities, and you need to create the opportunities. And that's kind of the message. And I would love to hear different people's views on this, and to what degree maybe you have, have you ever come across a situation that was really not possible to overcome? And in my case, despite all, and I come from, we had no money. I came here with one suitcase, like 15, 16 years ago. I still have no family in the UK. So I'm like, if I could do that, I kind of feel like maybe I'm asking too much of people, but I'm like, it's no excuse. We need to go and get it. We need to change that. And that's the debate side of it. So I'd be interested to hear what you guys have to say. Maybe Sanya always has some really good thoughts. Sanya, what do you think?
Thank you, Sami. Thank you for that compliment. Well,
and also I remember I missed you last time. Like, you were waiting there for ages. So
thank you. No worries. Well, I'm pretty much like, my story is fairly similar to yours. So I actually have this similar opinion. I moved to States from Europe 20 years ago, and moved by myself, and in a city that is not diverse at all. And in some of my first companies, I was, like, for a long time, I was a black sheep. I was the only one with accent. And a lot of people don't even travel outside of the state. So no matter, and plus I was a female in a corporate world, and I was an immigrant. And I didn't have like a husband as like a role that, people usually looked at, single women versus married women in a different way as well. So I always had to fight some, I don't know, always had to be in guard and fight some battles and people's different perspectives that, and always had to prove myself, like, and work harder, like 3 times more, that, just to show that if I have an accent, I do have a brain as well. But anyhow, and for all these reasons and different challenges, I got involved in diversity inclusion space a lot, because for me, as being an outsider and coming from somewhere else, it was, and also having my own personal experiences, it was actually very easy to recognize the gaps and different people's mindsets and whatever the challenges are that do have a solution, and start working on those in the city where I live. And I agree with you. What I've noticed is that fairly often people try to find the groups to belong to, which is fine, right? That's human nature, whatever you want to be, a woman, a Black person, or this or that, a mom, or anything, which is fine. The other thing, the problem with that is that fairly often comes, and it's still on, is that fairly often people become exclusive of everything else. And why I'm bringing that, relevant to your story, I've noticed that fairly often when people do that, labeling yourself is also a mindset. It's me against everyone else, instead of looking at yourself exactly the way you described. You're like, I'm no different than anyone else around me. Doesn't matter if they're, Black, white, men or not. This is the opportunity, or this is what I need to do. This is what I want to do. And I just go, regardless of how do I look and where. And then once I counter the challenges that I see if I can find the solutions for them. I know that's not always, like a perfect case scenario and a beautiful, an easy story, but people do have like a tons of different challenges just because they are, women or Black or Asian or anything like that, or immigrant, and don't get those opportunities. But that's, that's just one, certain percent of cases. Fairly often what I find, and these people are people that live here and are born and bred here, and still see some challenges because of tall, I'm short, this kind of that kind, I think this way or that way, instead of just, all these people around me are human as I am, and this is what I want to do, and you just figure out how and try, right? Make an effort to go and do it. I have a friend, very close friend, who is short and always had dating some tall guys, and someone asked her, how come you have such tall boyfriend? She was like, and you're so short. She was like, I don't see myself as a short. I don't feel that way.
That's the thing, right?
So I think that's
the thing, right? Like, it's about how you see yourself. I see an email here from Lynette asking how she speaks. Lynette, I see a Lynette in the audience. I just invited you to the stage, but the way you speak, you just raise your hand and I'll bring you to stage. So for anybody who is here who wants to talk, it's pretty simple. This is an open community, so you just raise your hand. Okay, cool. Okay, I can see you now. All right, I was trying to answer your email, and then I saw you in the. Yeah, exactly. It's about how you see yourself, right? So, Lynette, let's wait for Minnie because she was here first. Minnie, what's your take on this? Minnie, are you there? Okay.
Hello.
Oh, yeah.
Hello, this is my first time on Clubhouse, so
okay.
I didn't actually know what to do. There we go. I love everything you've all discussed so far. I think I resonate really a lot with what Sonia just said. So I find it quite interesting because my mum is from Suriname in South America, and my dad, he's passed on now, but he was German, and my mum came to England at a very young age and had me, and I saw her go through a lot of stuff as a child around racism. I got called all sorts of names as a child, and I remember, and I'll say this, I'll admit this, but I remember being embarrassed by my mum because her colour of her skin gave me a lot of grief. And the reason being, people always knew that I wasn't English, you know, I didn't have blonde hair and blue eyes and all that kind of stuff. They knew that I was obviously different, you know, you're a little bit foreign, aren't you? You know, that's the kind of thing that I'd get. And I think it's because there wasn't so much diversity back in those days. You know, I'm in my mid-40s now, so we're talking about the 70s, 80s.
Yeah.
And I think I've always been assumed to be, you know, Spanish or something. So when people met my mum, they were sort of taken aback, really. And I think they then realised some of the things they'd said inadvertently in front of me, you know, and I never really responded or reacted to it because I just found it quite interesting how people were and the thoughts that they had. And I think it just literally came from pure ignorance, to be honest. Once they sort of knew a bit about my background, they actually became quite curious. They're like, where's your mum from? And, you know, she looks Indian, because she does look quite Indian, but she's a mixture. She's got black, Indian. I mean, she jokes and says, I've got some Chinese in me as well, you know. And we were laughing and saying, let's get a DNA test, because perhaps we are the most multiracial people out there. But I saw her go through a lot of crap. And I think sometimes when you're a woman who is of colour and, you know, you're in a situation where you're going through a lot of crap, I think you either take it or you rise up and go, you know, F you kind of thing, and I'm going to show you. And I think she was one of those people. So I think it's very interesting. I have a kind of interesting thought on all of this. You know, I'm a mixed race woman. Born in the UK, but I think even in the UK there's sort of, would I call it racism? I think there is cognitive bias against people who maybe have a different accent, and I think that's becoming less and less of an issue now. You know, when I was younger, if someone didn't speak, you know, with a received pronunciation and all that, then they obviously weren't as intelligent as someone else. But that's just absolutely not true. It's nonsense.
Yeah.
But that was sort of the perception of society. So my hope and dream is that as we move forward and we live in a more globalised world and we are interacting with people from different cultures, different skin colours, different beliefs, different identities, I think we will eventually finally come to understand that we are one human race and that we are all the same, and we will become a lot more of accepting and more curious to understand one another.
Yeah.
And we won't even need this conversation, because people are, if you look at the entire human race, we're all diverse, a homogenous.
I think it's, yeah, you're absolutely right. And
society is very rare actually now.
So yeah, you're absolutely right. And one of the things that I love about comedy is that it's really good way of kind of, you know, conveying these thoughts in a way that's really punchy. And one of my favorite comedians is a lady called Shafi Khorsandi, and she says that she's half Iranian, and she's actually completely Iranian and married an English guy. And she says, when I take my kids to the doctor, you know, sometimes they ask, is he mixed race? And I say, what do you mean, like half human, half monkey? Or, you know, or she says, like, people tell me you look exotic, which means it's code for foreign, but not in a way that we hate. You know, and all of these are ways that, you know, it's an endearing way of dealing with the issue. You know, I've had people say right in my face that they you know, that they don't like when they hear somebody with an accent, and I'm like, okay, I'm sorry, I can't, there's not much I can do about that. You know, you just need to just sort of focus on the value that I bring and not think too much about my accent. But that's like, at the end of the day, that's like, it's just you know, it's just the way the society is. But none of that so the whole point of tonight's discussion is like, or today's discussion, depending on where you are, is that really it doesn't matter where you come from or what kind of diverse background. You know, like people of let's say neurodiverse, diverse background, they could say that they are feeling that kind of level of bias against them. Then people of different colors could say that. People of different ages. And speaking of age, for example, Marian here, she works with women who are going through menopause. So I'm sure that she has seen her own version of the kind of biases against women as they go through certain age, a different phase of their life. Marian, what do you think? Can you share some of your thoughts on, because we talked about this, like women sometimes feel that as they hit 50, they become invisible, and they're this has been something that even like MIT professors have said things like that to me, that they feel that they can see that society like literally just doesn't want to see you. So so that's another form of diversity conversation to be had. So what's your experience been?
Yeah, so thank you for inviting me, and I'm pleased to be here. So if I can just sidestep that, because on a personal level, I agree with everything that's been said, and kind of touched by what Minnie was saying, because I was thinking as you started the conversation that, my skin is white, maybe I don't have that much to offer to this discussion. But as you were talking, I just realized that, I'm a mongrel too, because my family came from Russia and Poland. And although I was born in the UK, my family are Jewish. And when my mom was a tiny child, she was evacuated. And I remember her saying, when she was telling her story, that where she went in Cornwall, they thought that Jews had horns. And so when she was in the hall and families were coming to collect children, they were kind of inspecting, looking in her hair to see where her horns were. So that was, and because we weren't a different color, people would sometimes be anti-Semitic in front of us, not realizing we were Jewish. And so I kind of encountered that from quite a young age. And then because my family didn't have any money, and they were really just starting out with the clothes that they came in, that there wasn't kind of high expectations placed on us in a school setting. I was supposed to, careers advisor said I should become a window dresser. And that was there was just no expectation. You were just a child of an immigrant. And the fact that I went on to write 28 books and help thousands or tens of thousands of women around the world with PMS and menopause. And then when my daughter tragically died, when she was a 21-year-old medical student, and I set up a foundation in her memory and got over 20 world-class experts together, and we campaigned for 6 years and eventually changed the law. We worked with the Prime Minister and the ministers and changed the law and made the world a safer place for young people. When I look back on all that, it's almost like imposter syndrome, because I think, well, how did I do that? Because I didn't really learn to do it. So where did it come from? And the only thing I can think of is that I am spiritual rather than religious. And I think that I feel connected, and I feel like my missions are universe driven. And I think that's what touched me so much about what Minnie said, was because we have to come to realize that we are all human beings. That's our common denominator. And we are, in that sense, all equal. And it's really to do more with our mindset and the mindset of others, I suppose, and how they treat us as to what our experiences are. And then going back to your point, Somi, about the fact that women of a certain age, and it's not even just a certain age. I mean, I've worked with so many women with PMS they have what I call the out to lunch syndrome for 2 weeks a month, where they're not themselves at all. And they can't be productive in the same way in the workforce. And so therefore they find it hard to compete in the way they would at other times of their cycle. And then when you get older and feel that you become invisible and you just don't feel that you can hold your space in the workplace. And I think the statistics show that 1 in 4 women are either thinking of leaving the workplace or do at the time of the menopause. And that's reflected by the fact that Forbes said in 2019 that $810 billion is lost globally each year because of lack of productivity associated with menopause. And so you've got this situation where you've got women who are going through their career path very successfully, competing with men, and then suddenly they fall over because of their symptoms, their hormones, and no one is telling them that they can actually do a U-turn and get better. And believe it or not, that this is the fastest growing sector in the workplace, and industry is bleeding, but the penny hasn't really dropped yet. So I think there's an awful lot of work to be done there too. And hopefully we'll demonstrate the economic model of how much you save by investing in your female workforce. So lots of different aspects of the diversity conversation. Yeah. And I'm just happy to listen to what everyone has to say. So thank you for inviting me.
Definitely. It's really important to remember that diversity is not just, obviously nowadays with the story of Meghan and Harry and things like that, people think only about race. There's so many forms of diversity that we need to think about and embrace. But ultimately, I would say to anybody that comes from a diverse background of any form, it's like, you've got to lean in, you've got to be aggressive, you've got to, take what is yours. So I don't know, it maybe, and that's the debate aspect. Maybe I'm wrong, but this has been my method of dealing with it, and literally just not seeing myself as different, like Sonia said. Lynette, what do you think? So you raise your hand. Lynette, am I saying your name correctly, Lynette? Okay, so maybe you're not hearing me. Sonia, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to recommend something. First, Marianne, thank you so much for everything you said, and thank you so much for doing the work in that space around PMS, menopause, because I think it's a huge thing. I totally agree with everything you said in the workforce, and I've seen it, I experienced it, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done for that to be normalized, and we become humans even if we're going through a menopause. Funny story, I would just add to the story about the horns. Like when I moved to States, no one looked at my horns, but like some of the Americans would literally ask me, do we have a television where I'm coming from? Like, how come we watch cartoons when we're kids? So really weird questions. They were like shocking to me. But I think, if someone doesn't have open mindset, that it doesn't matter if it's 30 years ago or if it's a 21st century. And there is a book that I would recommend, and maybe some of you know. It's called Why We Can't Sleep by Ada Calhoun. And she literally interviewed different women, and it's usually in their 30s and 40s and 50s, and they were all in a different status, different professional life, different personal life, and like kind of connected all, like how much we're going through in different stages, and what they think and the phases they're going through, and how so many of them just feel invisible and stuck in some way, and like a lot of different emotions that you have to go through in that age. So I would highly recommend it.
Okay, thank you. I'll definitely put that, because one of the things that we are doing with these sessions, actually, we're creating reports from the conversations. So because a lot of people are coming from lots of different time zones, and then there are times like now, because of we are near the Easter weekend, so a lot of people couldn't make it today. So we have the recording on the site, but also we will put like key takeaways from everything. So Lynette, sorry, I had to mute you for a second, so you can unmute yourself.
That's okay. Sorry about not understanding how to unmute myself earlier. I'm listening to the conversation, and one of the things before I go on stage or anywhere is I'm always like, well, what can I bring to this that is maybe another perspective or adds a different dimension? And just quick backstory, I came from abuse, and we adopted a boy that we called Indian at the time. I think they called him Aboriginal now. He was murdered. I have Black grandchildren, Arab grandchildren. Like we're like the UN, and we have huge story. And I adopted many mentally and cognitively multiply challenged children. And I could take this from and I'm old, so we could go from all of these angles. And I was just perusing my brain, like what can I bring to this discussion that is of use instead of just sort of a complaint or story. And the one thing I can say is that through it all, everything was a phase. Everything was a point in time in life where you brought it all together and you figured out what your focus and your goal was. Am I going to survive the grief? Am I going to, make sure that the school accepts my child? And if I can't make sure, will I move on and take them and homeschool them or take them to another community? There was always just a problem to solve. And as long as I stayed focused on solving the problem and knowing what I wanted to make happen, the answers came. And life wasn't so hard. However, that being said,
Oh, we lost you there.
The rest of the world. So, raising my kids who were so cognitively challenged and different and ethnically different in a nice neighborhood meant we stuck out. In a poor neighborhood meant they had poor models and examples. And so I had to dance back and forth all the time between finding them a place where they were accepted and finding them a place where they were encouraged and safe. Mm-hmm. And in the end, I pardon?
No, I'm listening. Yeah, I just said,
Yeah. So in the end, I solved all of this in a very unique way, which I'm about to do again. So it's going to be fun. But I put everybody in an RV, in a motorhome, and I bought up a bunch of timeshares and some resorts that allow for motorhomes. And we just traveled. And we went places where people were in a good mood and they were holidaying. And they had like lawn bowling and pool and shuffleboard and all these things. And they didn't necessarily look at you for your race. They looked at you for, is there an extra person for the basketball court? Is there right? And so the kids learned and changed. And whenever people were cruel, I just put us back in the motorhome and we moved to a new place. I could give them freedom that I couldn't in a neighborhood because we were in these resorts that were, they're gated. And they learned and changed at a speed that was like unbelievable. Nothing like that at school. And they were never treated badly as far as whether they were Arab or whether they were Indian or whether they were white or whether they were Mexican or whether they were Chinese. It was just whoever they were. And it didn't matter that some of them couldn't, grab at the ball good enough. They'd stick them in a spot to catch it as it came through the hoop. It was just really cool. So I guess what I'm saying is that at the end of the day, through all the different things, what life brought to me was an awareness that the solutions are there if we're willing to take them.
Yes.
And if we're willing to step out of if you don't have to do the status quo, just because there's a system for something doesn't mean it's right.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really important key takeaway. And it's upon us to lean in and take that. Alison, tell me your take on this.
Well, I think one of the biggest problems with diversity as a whole, and not just color, because I know that's like a really big thing. So a lot of people focus on that. But a lot of people just in general fail to look at the bigger picture. Like, there are two sides to every story. Obviously, you know, Meghan and Harry, that's a whole news thing. There are two sides to every story. Everybody is so focused on this is what one side is. And so, okay, that's it. I don't really follow it, because when you hear one side, it's really essentially gossip. And my personal experience is they're just people that will, aside from gossip, they don't actually think about things. There's cultural diversity. I remember when in 2013, I took my first vacation to Paris, and a friend of mine told me, you know, when you go into any place of business, Allison, make sure that you say bonjour, because that is culturally appropriate. If you don't, they will kick you out. And some people do not have like the cultural manners where they're willing to accept that and to go along with something like that. I don't know any personally, but where you do what's respectable in the country or state or province that you're going to, because that's what happens there. That's how they live. And if I had been kicked out, if I were to say, you know, it's because I'm a woman and the guy kicked me out, like that would be inappropriate. So I think there's a lot of things that contribute, like people failing to look at the bigger picture. And also there's so many conspiracy theorists, like going back to what Marion and Sonia were saying about horns and I'm Jewish. I've never been told anything about horns, but I can say for sure my entire life, November and December are miserable because I am invisible. In kindergarten, I was the only Jewish child in my class. My mother forced me to go in with a dreidel to put on the Christmas tree and explain what being Jewish means to my class, which at 5-year-old, I had no idea how to do that. But it got easier as I was older. I learned to spot little microaggressions, like when I'm working a photo shoot and somebody says, oh, well, Allison, you understand finances because you're Jewish. And it's like, well, did you really have to say that? But I just don't even bother because it's just not worth it. It happens. And we are all people at the end of the day. And it's just so unfortunate that we pay attention to things like conspiracy theorists, all these weird things that come up from conspiracy theories, and that we don't look at. There's so many people that don't look at the bigger picture in order to really understand what is going on.
That's right. But ultimately, I think for people, so I'm going to go back to Barbara here, because there are a lot of people also we need to think about this. And we are going to keep it short tonight because I know that it's near, you know, when I was creating this event, I completely forgot that this is before Easter and a lot of people couldn't make it. So I got a lot of messages from people saying that they couldn't make it. But we're going to keep it short, and we are going to do another big event to properly talk about this with a bigger audience. But I want to go back to Barbara here for you know, for her views on this, because Barbara, my beauty therapist, actually says, she's a lovely Black lady, you know, and she says that, look, Somi, color is an actual thing. She's like, you don't get it, because she's like, basically, if you close your mouth and don't talk, you can pass as a white woman. And she tells me that even between her and her sister, because her sister is a darker shade of Black, she gets a different treatment. And she tells me that there is something that you cannot possibly understand, that there is a level of you know, discrimination when it comes to color that is really different from anything else. So tell me a little bit about your take on that.
Well, I think that is correct. And if you look culturally, because I know some of us have been speaking about, you know, diversity within culture and cultural diversity, that exists within, you know, the Black community, the African American, African Caribbean community, also in the Asian Indian community where there's caste. It exists in a lot of communities in terms of level of socioeconomic status. So yes, it can happen across shade. It's called shadism in some communities. It can happen across shades. It can also happen with how wealthy you are. It can also happen, as I say, what part of the country or which school, and in this country in particular, UK, I mean, we have old school tie, which is for public school boys, and essentially if you want to work in the city or law or finance, you need to have gone to a certain type of school. So yes, it happens with colour, and she's correct. That's one of the ones that you can't do anything about. I often say, you walk into the room, you can make a decision straight away about me just by what shade I am. You've already decided. And, there's a little bit of respite to maybe other people who could pass if they wanted to. Everyone should be proud of their heritage, whatever it is. But you could pass for, what's more acceptable in the dominant society, which is as white. But it comes in all forms and shapes, as well as the shade of you, the shade you're in. It's socioeconomic, where you went to school, and your accent. I think Sanya was talking about accents earlier. I mean, that is part of that sort of, diversion as well.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, yeah, this is really important because we need to kind of be aware of that. I was quite shocked when she said that to me, because I was like, really? I wasn't aware of it, because I always thought of myself as an outsider, being, an immigrant, having an accent, all that stuff. It was really eye-opening to me. Carrie.
Hi, hello everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Hi, my name is Carrie Rosado. I am Latina. I'm originally from Nicaragua, so I am an immigrant, and I do DNI work. I'm a consultant for DNI, founder of my own organization, and I'm also an elected official, serve as a school board trustee here locally in San Jose, California. I wanted to just comment on the subject you're really discussing right now in regards to skin tone. I know growing up as a Latina, because I have the lighter tone, most people perceive me as a white woman. And growing up, oftentimes people would question whether my mother was actually my mother, simply because she happened to have a darker skin tone than I did. And so growing up, I had to deal with that. And so, I can totally relate to people judging you simply based on skin tone and making misconceptions as to your heritage or where you come from. And so that's one of the motivations that motivated me to get into DNI, and especially since I have special needs kids as well, and being a bisexual woman as well. These are all things I advocate for. So thank you for having this conversation.
Thank you, Carrie.
Speaking.
Thanks for sharing that. What we need to do, and what we're trying to develop through this platform to make it possible, is to break the stereotype and break the barrier, because it's always like, when you think about the first person who was able to do the 4-minute mile, but until then people thought it was impossible. And once one person did it, then it opened up for everybody else. So I think that's a great example. And the goal of what we are creating here is to create that opportunity for that 4-minute mile to happen. And when that happens, it opens a gate for every other woman, for from regardless of the background. We are really focusing on women and women of any background. So I try not to get too sucked into this diversity question. And sometimes one of the things that really bothers me is that a lot of the people who say, and look, I'm sorry if I upset some people by saying what I really think, but at the same time, I do have to be true to myself, and ultimately, this is, I guess, it's an area. Speaking about diversity is like it's a minefield. It's very, very hard to talk about it in a way that somebody won't get upset. But sometimes what bothers me is that the people who are heads of diversity, they don't necessarily have the qualifications to do the things that they advocate for. So what I mean is that, let's say, for example, there's somebody who's a head of diversity and is saying, we need to have more women in technology. But the way to make that happen is not by having somebody who doesn't necessarily know anything about engineering or diversity to dictate that. But the way to do that is by setting an example, to go and learn those things, learn those skills, break those barriers. You can't say, why is it that venture capitalists aren't investing in women? Or why is it that there aren't more angel investors investing in women? Well, the way you do it is by creating the precedence, but by actually, like I started investing, even though I could barely do it at the time when I started doing it, because you've got to create a positive, a positive feedback loop. And that's what we need to try and do. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that less complaining and more doing. And that would be my message. And I'd like to hear maybe one more person on this. And who wants to go? Maybe Sania, you want to go?
Yeah, sure. And I agree with you 300%. When my challenges started, was when I moved here and, experienced a bunch of different comments and putting down and anything, one of the examples I can bring, I was at work in one of my first trainings, and we had a group of white women and a group of black women, and we had black supervisor and white supervisor. So none of them would talk to me. If I asked the question, if I need something, neither group would talk to me. But God forbid I'm late for 2 minutes to work, both supervisors would report me, and because I didn't belong to either, right? And at first I was taking things personally, and of course being upset and stuff like that. And then I realized, well, they just don't know what they don't know, and I cannot change that. I cannot change them. What I can do is I can try to change that mindset with bringing the stories to them. So if these people don't travel, for example, as one of the examples, I'll bring that story from somewhere else to them, right?
Yeah.
Like through food, through music, through something that it's relatable, like the topics that are relatable to them. And that's how I started. And I'm thinking, you know what, they're always going to have people that are curious. And, when you share the story, and that can be anything, right? It can be history, it can be food, it can be your own experience, anything. You can, when you share it with them, it's going to get in there. They'll ask you questions that, it's going to spark some curiosity and open mind. And you have people that you're, closed-minded, and that's not going to change. The story will come in 1 year and cut out, and that's okay. But you also have that middle bucket where you have people that something will click. They're not going to negate it completely, but they're not going to accept it completely. But you will make some kind of a little change to them. So maybe the next time they meet someone else who is different, they're going to think, well, you know what, they're not that bad. They're also doing this and that, similar to that previous story that I heard, with that woman who was talking to me. So that's how I started. That's what I'm, still doing. And to me, so now we're like the diversity and inclusion in a way, what I'm afraid of it to become, because now it's huge as of last year. I'm just afraid of it becoming a new, just a trend and a fashion.
Yeah, that's my worry. Yeah, that's part of what I'm trying to say.
And I work in the corporate world for 21 years, and I worked parallel to that. I work a lot with the nonprofits and small businesses, so kind of check both worlds. And I can tell you that there are so many corporations, even before and especially now, they do have diversity and inclusion program. They do have different people sitting there. They do have executive managing preaching about oh, this is what we need to do, blah, 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 blah. But that doesn't go to the little people down in a letter. It gets stuck somewhere with a middle management who is closed-minded. So that, and why it's that critical, that middle management is critical, because that's the person, if they're not open-minded, they're the one hiring people. So they're going to hire people that, you know, they can relate to, they look like them, they talk to them, you know, people that are from the, and you know, have that bias towards someone who, you know, like, it doesn't matter if in appearance, you know, diversity is not only appearance, it's also the way you think, the way you approach things, anything, right? So if you do, you know, if you can complete a task from A to B in one way, and, you know, that's what's prescribed by the society, and you come in and do it in a different way, you know, they're going to question even that, right? So that's a critical to me, is, you know, creating the culture and of open-mindedness in that level, because executives are going to preach whatever is in a business case scenario. You know, are you going to actually do that? That's another thing. And also, you know, everybody's now, you know, if you're like looking for a job, it is every single company on the planet is looking for someone in DNI to, and like, you know, manager, program manager, something, right? Because everybody has to check that box that they have it and they're working on it, because it became very political. The problem is, you can have, if you hire diverse, which everybody's trying to do, you know, hiring diverse people is just one step, one thing. The problem is, you know, you can have, you know, black and white and men and female, but if you don't have inclusion, and if you don't have that culture of inclusion, these people are just going to be as isolated as you know, they're not there, you know, just so to me, you know, diversity without inclusion is nothing, you know, and no one is going to see that. You still remain with a closed mind of coworkers, managers, whoever, you know, that can be around you. So I think that's a critical, and right now I'm just afraid that because, you know, it got so political altogether, that I'm afraid that we may go to another extreme, right? And because it's a very fine line between inclusion and exclusion. So we're creating groups of Black people, we're creating groups of women, we're creating groups of Asian, but, you know, meanwhile, you know, whatever happened to either of these groups can happen to anyone else, because all you need is someone with a closed-minded and a hate, and, you know, they're going, and the target doesn't matter. So that's why, to me, you know, it's good to belong somewhere, and to have and to be recognized. But I think, you know, we all as a society should be very mindful of not going to exclusion point, that because, okay, now I'm a group of, I don't know, women with accent, immigrants, you know, like now, you know, I have to fight only for my rights and don't care about, I don't know, Asian people or, you know, male veterans or anything like that.
That's why, you know, we when people come to me and say, oh, how about race? You need to talk about this, or how about this? And I'm like, you know what, like, we are talking about women. That's 53% of society, and raising their socioeconomic status will solve so many problems. And that's a pretty big group, and we can create a whole new economy, a whole new you know, ecosystem, and so like you say, you know, inclusion of all of the groups. This is.
Can I just add something? So can I just add something
yes.
to what Simon's saying? Because I think what she's describing is, which is really important in this type of group, is the intersectionality, that we can all be women, but as with your own story, Somi, it's also other things as well in other groups. And once anybody who's doing a good job in DNI, or, you know, is one, they're looking at inclusion, but they're also looking at intersectionality, and that stops us, Sanya, from being just, you know, separating ourselves into different funnels, you know, moving from one group to another group and only caring about that group. If we all remember that we are lots of things across lots of groups, even if we're just focusing on, you know, women, but we are lots of things in lots of groups, it stops that exclusion you were talking about.
Yeah, Barbara, absolutely. In my last corporation, we had business resource groups, and I belonged in women. I mean, and I was active and intergenerational one, and the something that had like something like an immigrant group. And when people are asking me, I was like, that's all me.
Yes.
I am a woman, I am, certain generation that I'm, fighting for, I am an immigrant. So like, I cannot be only one, and I don't see myself one, and I don't want to be one to begin with, because I see all these differences as a treasure. They're all value. Yes. And they made me and make me more valuable as a person.
Yeah, I agree.
Exactly. So thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for your patience today. And I'm sorry, I should have thought about the fact that it's just before holidays, and so many people couldn't make it today. But the conversation is recorded, and it will go on the platform, and people can tune in and watch back, and then we will have another conversation on this topic. Also, please do send me messages. Oh, and for the people who are watching on YouTube, it seems like there's a problem today with the chat on the platform. So I am reading the chat from YouTube, but sorry, we are bringing in a whole new. We've just raised part one of our investment for the platform. So we are bringing on board a whole new team of developers to work on it. So things will keep getting better, and we have a whole lot of new. We are going to basically build our own conferencing on the site, so we will no longer be doing this on Zoom or on Clubhouse, so that it will become a lot easier for everybody to join in comfortably from our own platform. So that's one of the things we're working on. So I'm sorry if things are not perfect, but so far everything we built just with like my 1%, myself. I paid for everything so far, so we didn't have big budgets, but now we have got investment, and we are bringing a whole new team, and things will keep getting better. So thanks for your patience, thanks for your support, and we will continue the conversation, and hopefully we will be able to bring in a larger audience next time of more. I would have loved to see more Black women here today, more people from different kinds of backgrounds, but also I'd really like to hear more from people who have maybe autism or different kinds of neurodiversity. I'm very passionate about neurodiversity, and I'm always very open about my own the fact that I have ADHD and all that stuff. So I'm very open about that. So I'd be really open to hear about people with other kinds of diverse experiences. So thank you, everybody. And today we've had a shorter conversation because lots of people couldn't join, but we will have another session on this very soon. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Nice to meet you all.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.